First of all, thank you very much for your invitation. I want to speak about the future of conservatism, but in general, the future of national, yes, thank you very much. The future of national populism and sovereignism in Europe. First of all, I want to introduce the concept of sovereignism and the concept of national populism. So, in recent years, the words such as sovereignism and sovereignty have been used with increasing frequency in the public debate. To prove the importance of these ideas, we must remember that the Article 1 of the Italian Constitution states that sovereignty belongs to the people. Until a few years ago, according to the public perception, Italy was a full-fledged sovereignty state. But already in the 90s, a series of signs that national sovereignty was being limited in favor of supranational identities began to emerge. Some people believe that the end of the Italian sovereignty was caused by the Sigonella crisis in 1985. The Sigonella crisis, it was an important event for Italy. It was a fight between our prime minister, it was a socialist prime minister, Bettino Craxi, and the president of the United States, Ronald Reagan. Others think that our sovereignty started to suffer several limitations already in the 50s with the suspicious death of Enrico Mattei. Enrico Mattei was the leader of ENI, the Italian National Petrol Society, and the following ended to Italy's ambition for a real energy policy. And some others even trace it back to the defeat in the Second World War. But the people actually began to witness the fall of the state authority in the relation with respect of the European Union with the introduction of the single currency and the choice to adopt the euro in Italy. It was a latent sovereignty restriction which became clearer with the 1880 crisis and along the progressive worsening of the European and Italian citizens' quality of life, and is a factor which is often considered as one of the main causes of the contemporary society problems. In a political context where the contracts between the right on one side and the left on the other side seem to have been replaced by new category and considered to the 20th century background, we are living a new differentiation between the egalitarian party, those linked to the ideas historically represented by the progressive thinking. So the egalitarian party are a globalist and pro-European parties. And on the other hand, we have the sovereignist party and the national populist bloc. The national populist bloc is represented in Italy by Matteo Salvini. We talk about him. And here, for example, in Hungary by Orban, or in France by Marine Le Pen. The words of the former president of the European Commission, Juncker, at the University of Leeds sum up clearly the current conflict. In his opinion, we must tackle stupid populism and nationalism. We must look at what the Europe has built. We have developed a borderless Europe. So Juncker wants a borderless Europe, and we have created a single currency, and now we have to strengthen the role of the euro. So if on the one hand, Juncker talks about a borderless Europe. On the other hand, the sovereignists hope for a Europe in which borders still maintain a specific value and meaning. This macro division presents some problems, especially in the relation to the populist movement. In the media debate, the word populism and sovereignism are often used as synonymous, but in the fact, this category of thought present many differences. For example, talking about the Italian context, we have several different points between the Lega, led by Matteo Salvini, and the five-star movement, Movimento 5 Stelle. The Lega is a sovereignist and a national populist party, and the five-star movement is a populist or a left populist party. The different views on the economic matters and the opposite perception on the ethical issues and the identity values, the concept of the identity is a strong concept linked to the sovereignist party, are a clear example. In the last election in Europe, there was a boom in the numbers in support of the sovereignists, who elected their representative in the national and in the European Parliament, and in certain countries even managed to reach the government, like here in Hungary. According to an article published in the magazine Panorama entitled "It's Easy to Say Sovereignist," the sovereignist party are driven by the effects of globalization, the economic crisis, the unemployment, and the increasing crime rate. So the sovereignist wave has taken root among suburban areas, working class districts, and in the middle class in general. And they all feel like the European Union is the big bad enemy to defeat. The previous Italian government, led by Lega and Five Star Movement, has taken a testing ground in which two political forces, sovereignist the former and populist the latter, signed an agreement taken as the reference by all similar parties in Europe. Now, in Italy, we don't still have this government led by Lega and Five Star Movement, but now we have a new government that is maybe the leftist government in the history of our republic, because it's a government led by Partito Democratico, that is a traditional left party, led by Five Star Movement, that is a populist, left populist party, and also led by a small group of parliamentarians that are linked with the extreme left. In Italy, the international sovereignist project revolves around Matteo Salvini Lega, which for some years now has been networking at the European level, trying to develop a sovereignist front within the European Union. The Lega is not a traditional right-wing party, but is at all a post-ideological movement. And that's why we must reject the theory exposed by some liberal media or exposed by some liberal and progressive politician that Lega is a far-right party. Similarly, we cannot dismiss the exploit of the Lega as just another electoral success in a series of victories won by nationalist and xenophobic parties. The liberal media and the most important politician of the left try to summarize the experience of Lega like a xenophobic party, like a racist party, or like a fascist party. But that's not true, because Lega is definitely a post-ideological party. So putting the labels of racist and xenophobic on the sovereignist movements means to ignore the view of these political forces, and dismissing the electoral success with this slogan doesn't really help to understand in an objective way the phenomenon. The very use of the word populism covers a big spectrum that includes conflicting views on many issues, which make it impossible to talk about this political category in a single way. The two central topics in the electoral programs of sovereignist party are immigration on one way and the relation with the European Union in the other way. The views of European Union evolved in the years on the part of the Lega. At first, the Lega Nord, because now Lega is a national party, but in the past, Lega Nord was only a regional party focused on the north of Italy. And so, at first, the Lega Nord embraced a federalist view for a Europe of region, for example, the Catalan, the Irish, the Scottish autonomy battle, with the focus on the autonomy of individual regions at the expense of the national state. But over the time, the idea changed, and now Lega want to fight for a Europe of people and want to fight for a Europe of nation. And this is a vision based on the project of the popular sovereignty, opposed to the choices of the European Commission and opposed to the so-called Brussels bureaucracy made in recent years. So, as Lega evolved from a territorial party to a national one, the territorial focus shifted, therefore, from a subnational level to a supranational one, but maintain feature change from being a regionalist-centered party against the national state to those of a national popular party against Europe and its politics. Within the political line of Lega, as an Euroscepticism that took root not only among the traditional party electorate, but also outside it, helping this party to grow. The electoral narration of Matteo Salvini and the electoral narration of the sovereignist leaders like Giorgia Meloni of Brother of Italy is based on the ongoing clash between the establishment on one way and the people, the normal people, on the other way. And it juxtaposes the political movements that propose the political demands against the traditional party which have been running Europe for several years, for example, the liberal parties or the social democrats. So today in Europe, there are two political blocs completely at the odds, the sovereignist on one way and the globalist and the progressive on the other way. As the Financial Times put with a piece written by Ben Hall titled Macron versus Salvini, the battle over Europe, political future, the future of Europe depends on the challenge between Salvini and also Orban on one way and Macron on the other way. And while the Lega leader became a reference point for all the European Euroscepticism, the French president is representing the face of the European progressive. And the leader of En Marche regards the return of nationalism in Europe as the main evil to defeat. Traditionally, nationalists and populists always had a hard time finding common ground and merging in a single group in the European Parliament. But the growing scale of the immigration issue and the hostility toward the European Union might represent a bonding agent. Besides the fact that the sovereignty of the single state progressively declined, denting the national interest, brought about the spread of nationalism. So Salvini saw in Macron and in the French government the enemy to engage and to increase his electoral support, using, for example, the Italian anti-French feelings. Even before the Yellow Vest protest that undermined Macron's credibility and economic policy, on the European side, the French president made a proposal for a common European army and a more centralized economic community politics. And the French political context is essential to understand the development of sovereignism in Europe, both for the role of Marine Le Pen from the Front National, now the Rassemblement National, and the Macron presidency. Finally, I want to talk about the European election and what is the future of sovereignism. So, sovereignism spread in Europe not just because of identity reason, but also because of the financial factor. As Gianmarco Ottaviano highlighted on Il Sole 24 Ore, that is an important Italian newspaper, and Ottaviano called the Brexit a vote against the globalization, particularly against the perceived inequality in the distribution of its costs and benefits. So the Brexit is a protest vote made by the people who experienced firsthand the negative effects of the globalization. Building on the United Kingdom election results, the analysis could be applied to the whole Europe to explain the choice made by citizens in search of protection in favor of the sovereignist party, hoping this could do something about the institution who took unfavorable decision of them. So a demand born out of a lack of redistribution and of the globalization benefits. In Europe now, there is a boom in sovereignist party number, even though this often didn't reach the government. On the other hand, the most remarkable factor in the European election in Italy is the Lega triumph with more or less the 35% of vote, establishing the victory of the sovereignist thinking in the Italian political landscape. But the result, above all explanation for the party, rewarded Matteo Salvini's communication strategy, his firmness on the immigration issues, and the Italian people's request for an identity policy focused on the national interest. And that national interest is actually the heart of Lega sovereignism. The concept of national interest is central in Lega and Brothers of Italy politicians. But at the same time, it's well represented also by Fratelli d'Italia. The sovereignist landscape, we can divide the sovereign landscape in three big areas. The first one is closer to conservatism and is represented by Brothers of Italy. A second one is characterized by the social component and represented by a small area of the five-star movement, and the majority Lega component with a somewhat more fluid identity.
different souls which are represented at the European levels by the sovereignist party with their different identities, summing up perfectly by the post-ideological character assumed by the sovereignists. There is a wonderful book written by Matthew Godwin that is called National Populism, and in this book Godwin explains the difference between the sovereignist party. So besides the success of sovereignist party, the Italian vote deserves some remarks. First of all, the fluidity of the vote and the collapse of the five-star movements. The five-star movements passing in the European election from the 33% of the last national election to the 17% in the European election. The second point is the inconsistency of the fascist menace. All the liberal media want to say that Lega, how I said before, is a fascist party, but the Italian people don't understand this view. The third important point is the difference between the big city and the suburban areas. So the division between big city and the countryside. In the big city, like for example Rome or Milan, a lot of people vote for the leftist party, but in the suburban areas or in provincia, we say in Italy, the provincia are a small city in our country, the people decided to vote more for the sovereignist party. Although the Lega was the first party at the European election in Italy, it has not been included in the European appointment process, not just because of the government fall alongside the five-star movement, but also because of the lack of adhesion to one of the major groups in the European party. The Orban choice to be part of the PPE, so the Popular Party in the European Union, is an intelligent decision because it can change the process of European Union. The PPE choice so to make an alliance with the Social Democrats and the impossible to form a majority of Popular Party, sovereignties and conservative brought to the inability to choose the appointment of the European Commission and the BCE. In any case, although far from being a majority, the presence of sovereignists within the European Parliament has increased, and it has a great role compared to the last Parliament term. The lack of a unified group is, of course, a weakness for the sovereignist force, but if the parties will be able to find a common ground despite their difference, the chance to make a difference will increase too. Is the sovereignist result a bubble bound to the flat, or will it take hold in the years to come? Monk is the author of a wonderful book titled The People versus Democracy, Why Our Freedom is in Danger and How to Save It. In an interview published on Corriere della Sera, following the European election, explained, "Do not underestimate the sovereignist wave, for it could be long-lasting." And he continues, "The most fundamental questions are not economic anymore, but social-cultural. 20 years ago, if I wanted to know if you were a leftist or a rightist, I would have asked if you were willing to pay more taxes in exchange for social service. Today, I'm going to ask what do you think about the illegal immigrants? On these issues, the strongest answer comes from the populists or the sovereignists, as they beat the center right." So, finally, the idea of the nation is central for the sovereignist party, and the idea of the nation should be put in the center of the Europe, to build a land of nation, a Europe of nation. As Kirchhoff wrote in his book, Europe, the History of an Idea. Having thought the sovereignist and the conservative party are far from the majority in the European Parliament, the European election established an alternative view of the European and the change to develop a common project in the next years. In the respect, the election must be considered at a starting point, not an arrival point, to understand what sovereignism really is. And it's important to start from an assertion. The sovereignist party are not all against the idea of Europe itself, but they are in fact a European policy force opposing the current policy of this European Union. Saying that the sovereignists are anti-European is not only a stretch, but a full-fledged mistake, as it would be naive to assert that sovereignty are against Europe. It means not to understand the sovereignties and the Conservative Party's demand, which not only see the European history as a part of their identity, but the fight to defend it from the attack and the attempts to reject or to erase the core values of Europe. The sovereignists are against the current European Union policy, for they judge it distant from the citizens' needs and they judge it distant from the people's needs. That is why they are making ever necessary to effort to review it. The view on the European Union have changed also, and the vast majority of sovereignists want to change the European Union and not exit from the European Union. And the main standpoint is the creation of a new European project founded upon a confederation of sovereign and nation states, where the individual states have more power and autonomy, while being united by common views on some macro areas, such as foreign affairs. The problems that arise in developing such a project is given by the French and Germany dominion over the European Union. In the January of last year, France and Germany signed a cooperation treaty at Aachen, inspired by the Élysée Treaty that de Gaulle and Adenauer signed in the same day in 1963. The aim of this French and German treaty is not only to reaffirm the already existing bilateral agreements, but also to make new deals in the military and the intelligence field through the German-France Security Council. Besides the military factors, the treaty was signed to develop a German-French economic space with common rules, an economics expert council, and new shared social measures managed by a common parliamentary assembly. So a full-fledged political agreement made by Merkel and Macron shows the aspiration to hegemony of the two nations at the European level, and therefore within the European policy. Today, we are facing the risk of an increasing centralization of power in the hand of the European community, with more and more cession of national sovereignty from national states that would increase the German and French power at the expense of other nations. First and foremost, Italy, which is the third economy in the European Union. So nations such as Italy and Hungary, and nations such as Italy and in general the Visegrad Group, should follow a twin-track road. On the one hand, it is necessary to build an alliance and strike stronger deals within the European Union. And so is desirable a close cooperation between Italy, the third country in European Union, and the Visegrad Group. And on the other hand, it is necessary to develop bilateral relations also outside the European Union, for example, with nations like the United States, to increase the weight of our country, of Italy and Hungary, both in political and economic terms. I think that this is the only way to change this European Union. Thank you.